Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Bacasa. On today's show, we got Jon Easdo from Anglers Covey on the show. Jon, it's great to have you on the show. And before we get started, I want to just give everybody a little bit of a background on you. You've been fishing since you've been 12 years old. In fact, you have a really special relationship with the shop because you actually went into the shop at around 12 years old. And that was one of your first shop fly fishing experiences to get some advice, etc. And you've been sticking around since. Now, you've made quite an impression. Obviously, you are a signature tire for Umpqua. You are a Cortland pro. You've been guiding for years. You handle a lot of their services side of the business. But on top of that, you've also worked with the Morning Hatch Foundation, which is a mental health organization. That's absolutely incredible and a great cause. We've had a number of shows around that. And you specialized in a few things that we're going to cover today. One of which is something that I like to refer to as the recent angler migration to Stillwater, which is something that's occurring across fly fishing in general, just in a lot of ways to get away from crowds, to offer alternatives. And there's a lot more education, I think, just available about it, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a hoot of a time. You catch some hogs. People don't realize like there's some big hogs in the Stillwater. And then we're going to talk about a little bit about a specific technique that you like to use called midge stripping. And then we're going to wrap up the show with our tip or our value add to the audience, which is how to break out of that mold or that confined box that most people kind of get into, where they do the same thing over and over again because they're having success in there, but how to experiment with other areas and really have a lot of fun with that. And some of the things that you've seen your customers do, or you've advised customers to do, or friends, etc., to break out of that box. So I'm looking forward to the show, man. It's great to have you on, Jon. Let's get rolling here.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. It's a pleasure to be on the show. I'm super excited to talk to you and everybody else out there about well, what little I know, but it's fun to talk about for sure.
Yeah. Well, fly fishing is one of those things. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Absolutely.
So we're in the same camp on that one. So you're in Colorado Springs.
Yep.
You are fortunate in that you have a pretty broad perspective of a lot of different anglers, actually, because you have people come in from out of state all the time, probably fish the Platte and everything else in and around there that's very well known.
Yep.
But one of the passions you've had recently is this Stillwater migration. Tell us a little bit about what you're hearing and seeing there, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, it's it's funny because we do live, in my opinion. I've had I've been blessed enough to go to enough places around the country fishing, and there's a lot of amazing fisheries. But here at home, it's very unique, and we have a lot here. In my mind, we kind of live in the mecca of fly fishing. Everything is relatively close, a lot of different experiences, and again, to year-round fishery. I don't ever put the fly rods away. In fact, I just put on a heavier jacket and and go. So here locally, our home river is the South Platte River, and it's a very well known river. Sections like the Green Stream, 11 Mile Canyon, Cheeseman Canyon, Deckers, all those locations are very well known, and they're pretty busy all of the time. And so what we started to see a lot of years ago was, and actually the owner of Anglers Covey, Dave Lineweber, he had a statement that that we all kind of got behind. And, we're not going to grow the river. The river's not going to get any bigger. It's a kind of double-edged sword as someone in the fly fishing world. And as a guide, I want people to come fly fishing. I want people to grow in that and really find fly fishing an important part of their life, right? But the angler in me, I don't want anybody else on the water. I don't know if you relate to that, but
yeah, it is. It's double-edged, and not only that, but like there's a big part. And when I go out, I'm like, man, I want somebody else to experience this.
Absolutely.
I've had so many good times on the Cheeseman or the Platte, and I'm speaking from your perspective. Like, I really would love for somebody to experience that. But at the same standpoint, there's other experiences too that might be better for that situation. So I
Yeah.
think it's like a juxtaposed position in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And so we really, I've been fishing Stillwater for pretty hard for about 12 or 13 years, maybe even closer to 15 years. Um, just because the Stillwater opportunities in our area are so good. Um, you know, that many years ago, there wasn't hardly anybody doing it. There was a handful of us, and we all knew each other, and we
Mm-hmm.
all shared fly patterns and techniques. And but as someone in the fly shop, it's something that we've really been trying to encourage for a lot of years. We went even as far as opening up basically a boat division in our shop where we sell fishing kayaks. We're a full line
Hmm.
Hobie dealer, so we're one
Okay.
of two in the state of Colorado, um, and really got behind that and encouraging people to try a different experience. One of the things we hear the most in the fly shop or even through our social media is how busy the rivers are. And
Mm.
it's it's understandable. I mean, a lot of these places, with the exception of Cheeseman, are very easy to access. So people of all different ability levels and physical ability levels can access these rivers. They're all gold medal rivers. There's, thousands and thousands of fish per stream mile. It's not a big mystery why these places are busy. And they're
Right.
beautiful. The fish quality is up there, so and that's really it, the impressive thing is that that's kind of maintained. The fisheries, take hits here and there for sure, but for the most part, there's enough people that care for those resources where they are thriving. Um, for the most part, I won't get it.
Yeah.
I won't
Yeah.
get into specifics in that, but there's always concerns on any fishery. Every angler guide has those concerns.
Yeah.
Um, but what we started to see was just this huge opportunity when you're looking at a lake, it's pretty impossible to get crowded. You can always go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that access increases when you have some type of watercraft. So that's kind of what we really started to shift about 6, 7 years ago. And, another thing that we say in the shop is, we don't sell product, we sell fly fishing. We really want to get behind that experience component of fly fishing. That's what it's all about. That's what hooks us all. That's why we're all still in it. It's those experiences. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so as a guide,
Uh,
I'm almost to the point. I was just on a trip a couple days ago, and this question always comes up, like, oh, it must be frustrating to see people catch fish and you can't get in there and fish, do all that stuff. And I'm almost to the point now where guiding is way bigger of a reward for me than actually fishing myself. I love to see that light go off and to be able to be that intermediary between someone and that outdoor experience. It's a pretty overwhelming thing that I'm super grateful to be a part of.
yeah. That is a unique perspective too, because um, there is a point where you become competent
Yeah.
enough to where you're like, hey, I really feel like I can go to any type of water and catch
Hmm.
fish. So then a lot of times your objective changes, right? I see guys who are go, okay, now my objective is I want to get a trophy of some
Yeah.
sort, or I want to catch these types of specific
Hmm.
species, or I want to target this specific type of technique, etc. So it becomes like you're really kind of cutting it down. But from a guiding perspective or a teaching perspective, that's another window to open, right? Like, okay,
100%.
now
Yeah.
let me see if I can challenge myself to take someone who's like a zero to a hero in the same day. I mean, it's not easy
Yeah.
to do. You can't hook the fish for them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, exactly. And it's I have a belief too. It's funny. I share this with our new guides or guides that are kind of new to that whole world of being a fly fishing guide. Is it's really interesting. The solution to a tough day as a guide and the solution to a good day are exactly the same thing. Um,
mm-hmm.
you start doing different techniques, maybe throw some streamers, some dry flies, And that's really what I do. It doesn't bother me if someone's a beginner. We're not going to stare at a strike indicator all day. I
Right,
want
right.
to have them throwing some dry flies and just kind of read the day. Um, and that really kind of backs up to my whole perspective on what fly fishing is and what we do at the shop, honestly. As, let's push those boundaries. Let's think outside the box. Sure, it's fun to go rail fish all day on an indicator rig, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it gets kind of
Mm-hmm.
boring, right? Like, let's try something else.
Right,
Let's
right,
Euro
right.
nymph. Let's try
Well,
some different techniques and really show that angler how wide this door is that we all walk through in fly fishing.
right, and a lot of that comes down to your communication with
Absolutely.
your customer right out of the gate, right? Like, hey, what's your objective for the
Yep.
day? Is it to rail fish because you're in town on vacation with your family and you want your kids to get into
Yep.
fish? Okay, that's one objective. Is your objective to really learn fly fishing? That's a whole nother
Yep.
thing. We might get into a couple fish today, and we're going to try and do that. But if we really want to learn, I would love to teach you 3 or 4
Hmm.
techniques today so that you can go home and do that on your home river
Yep.
or go to another vacation and have a repertoire to start with, etc. And it's tough because I hear guides all the time say, I'm burnt out, man.
Yeah.
I'm tired because and especially here, I'm in Park City,
Oh, yeah.
Utah.
Yeah.
We get a lot of people that come in, they want to go fish the Provo River, and they're not thinking about fly fishing. They're thinking about catching
Yes,
fish.
exactly.
And, you get them into a whitey and they're just as excited as they would with an 18-inch brown. And the guides are like, gosh, really?
Yeah.
They're not getting it. And you're like, well, the communication up front has to be there to get it, right? It's a two-way street.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, you're probably familiar with Kirk Dieter. Kirk's a good friend of ours. And
Mm-hmm.
he's throughout this winter, he's been writing some really interesting pieces on like what fly fishing is and in terms of guides' relations to the resources. And uh, I encourage everybody listening to this, look at some of those things. It's a little edgy and it can sound a little harsh, but he's pretty spot on with that stuff. And I think as not only as an angler but as a guide or someone in fly fishing, it's our responsibility to make better stewards that are coming into this.
Yeah.
Fly fishing experienced an insane growth during COVID, as I'm sure everybody that's fly fished, for at least the last 3 or 4 years has seen. Um, we saw that here at the shop, and we didn't know what to expect going into COVID. Our guide staff went from 30 guides to 5 because people were worried about what was going to happen, and we were kind of preparing for just to get absolutely just have a really bad year, right? We were preparing for
Mm-hmm.
that, and in fact, it was the polar opposite. It was so busy that we couldn't keep up with it. It was so
Yeah.
busy that I mean, we had unprecedented growth in our outfitting and our retail. Um, and so what happened there is we had a lot of new users coming into fly fishing, and really our focus started to become is let's embrace them and welcome them in. The last thing I want to do is throw up a wall and another barrier into fly fishing. Um, those barriers have existed for decades, and the industry's done a great job of chopping those down. So we didn't want to go that direction, but we took it more as an opportunity to, let's really hit these points, the important points about caring for the resources and being a good steward, being a good neighbor. What is etiquette? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and all those things. So we've kind of looked at that as an opportunity to try and do that. And while it doesn't work perfectly, we feel like we have been able to do that.
Yeah. Make an impact.
Yeah, and the longer I've been fly fishing, the most important thing starts becoming is how do I give back. Um,
Yeah.
I have 2 kids, and so that's at the forefront of everything I do. It's right in my face. Is how do I leave this place a better place for them? And
Yeah.
that's important. I think the picture gets a little bigger, and it's not just about fly fishing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's refreshing to hear because I'm in the same boat. I got 2 young
Yeah.
girls,
Yep.
12 and 15.
Mm.
And, my background, I started fly fishing as an adult. I was a cancer survivor.
Oh, wow.
I was real heavy into uh, endurance
Mm,
sports, and I actually had a stage 4 Hodgkin's disease.
wow.
And I lost functionality of my left lung, the majority of it. And so I couldn't do the endurance stuff. So my buddies introduced me to fly fishing, and it was one of those scenarios where it saved my life mentally. It really gave me the ability to be outside again and have a passion again, because I lost a lot of that.
Yeah.
So it was really important to me. And I want to go back because what you touched on about the growth side of things, I think is really a unique scenario. And it's happened in a number of different sports, and I've seen it happen before.
Yeah.
I saw it happen in mountain biking, and specifically, and I'm going to kind of talk about it in this
Yeah.
scenario. There's so much self-education out there now regarding fly fishing that you can start and go fly fishing on your own and be self-educated and be successful.
Mhm.
It wasn't like that. It was a mentor
Mhm.
program before where your uncle or your grandfather or your friend taught you. And if you really think about it and look back, that all started with, this is how it's supposed to happen. You're supposed to take care of the environment. You're supposed to
Mhm.
treat the fish right. You're supposed to do all that stewardship and whatnot was all ingrained through the mentorship program, because it was just, that's how it was
Yeah.
done. Now, what I believe I'm seeing occur is people get really educated. They get educated on the technique and the type of fishing, etc., but they don't necessarily get educated on the mentorship until they start to value the fishing, and then they start to look or get impressions on the conservation and stewardship
Yeah.
side, right? So it's a little bit backwards. So I'm going to throw this
Mhm.
out there just to the listeners. Hey, here's my challenge to you. Try to add mentorship into each outing. When you're in the lot and you see someone and they're struggling, or on the river and they're struggling, go talk to them, mentor them. Hey, did you need some help? Did you have any questions? Let me give you the good hole for a bit. I'm done here, or whatever it might be. All those little things, just one or two little things, even a season, is a huge difference. And then, open that opportunity. Hey, have you ever checked out the so-and-so club? We do a lot around this or that. I think that is, an excellent contribution and a very easy thing for us to do as anglers, to keep that conservation and keep it going for, like you said, our kids and grandkids and whatever. So
Yeah.
I got
Absolutely.
on a little bit of a stool there for a minute, but you kind of opened that door for me, so I wanted to make sure we cover that. I think it's so important.
Well, you're
So
absolutely
important.
right, and honestly, that's kind of our whole view and vision here in the shop. I mean, from the folks that are working on the floor and selling flies to our guides, we have a very positive culture here, and I really believe that it starts with us. Um, it starts with us, and if we can be those positive beacons for the new anglers coming in and really invite them in, then we have the room to have those conversations. When
Yeah,
there's walls
yeah.
up, people don't, if someone's fishing a couple of spawning fish and someone walks up to them and, you know,
What are you
yeah, goes
doing?
completely nuts on them, I mean, that's not going to be very effective. But, if they walk up to them and kindly educate them why that's not a good idea, that will leave a way better and long lasting impression.
Yeah,
And we've,
yeah. I
as a
agree.
fly shop and as guides and all that kind of thing, we've gone to great lengths to try to get those messages out there and be open for those conversations, right? Um, and I think the more that happens, I'm really happy that I know a lot of people in fly fishing and everyone's kind of singing that same tune. And I can see that shift. We can see it here in the shop. I can see it nationwide. It's cool to
Yeah,
see. It's cool to be a part of. We're all pulling the same rope, and we just need to keep doing that. And I think it's just going to get better. Um,
yeah,
but
yeah.
first and foremost, it's about being inviting. I mean, our tagline here at Anglers Covey is inviting you into adventure. Um,
Oh, that's
and
cool.
that's exactly what it is. We want to be kind of that resource to comfortably have people come in and not be intimidated
Yeah.
and not turn them off, and that's what I think is short-sighted by some people in fly fishing. They don't realize that, someone could walk in the door and that could be their first fly fishing experience. And it better be a good one, because if it's not, then we all lost that person. Yeah,
Yeah, we all
they're gone.
lose, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And I'll say, I was an adult, right, when this was
Yeah.
going on, and I was 35 years old, um, and I was
Yeah.
intimidated. I remember thinking, well, I don't want to ask him about the
Yeah.
spot, or, you know, but I was really fortunate. I had guys like Cheech from
Yeah.
Fly Fish Food, Colby Crosland, who's up on the Green River. He's a guide up there for spinner fall.
Hmm.
And a couple other guys. There was a guy, Ben, here at my local shop called Trout Bump 2, and they were really inviting.
That's
I was
awesome.
I was unfortunate with my disease, but I was fortunate in that I was, the guy. I didn't have any hair. I looked sick,
Yeah.
so I think they took a little pity on me in some ways. But it was good for me because I was learning how to tie, and I remember it was a great experience. I took my fly box with all my flies I tied. Hey, do these look
Yeah.
okay? And they were really cool. Like, oh yeah, these look really good. The only thing you want to work on is making them a little more uniform, so everyone's the same size, even though you're using the same hook. You're a
Yeah.
little off, and just those little things, man. They just really help me progress and feel more comfortable. And they would offer up tips, and I mean, my acceleration just went through the roof because I felt comfortable. Now I know a lot of guys have gone in the shops and they're like, I don't even want to talk to anybody. I just feel so intimidated.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, that's what they're here for. So we're going to get into some of that. So I'm going to stop. We're going to jump back. Let's talk about Stillwater.
Yeah.
You have people, again, they come in the shop. You start to suggest the Stillwater. You mentioned a couple ways that you do that. Let's talk about the actual fishing side of
Yeah.
things and how you go about that.
Well, and what I really like about it is it's completely different. In fact, it's a complete 180 difference from the technical tailwaters of the South Platte. Where we're fishing 5 and 6X and size 26 midges and all that kind of stuff. Very delicate and technical fish. Perfect drifts, the right patterns, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I love that in a sense as an angler, because when you're fishing in environments like that, it makes you a better angler. You're paying attention to all those fine points. Um, and that's enabled, me to have success no matter where I go. But with Stillwater, it's fun. I mean, we get to use like 7 weight rods and 2X tippet and size 10 flies. So
Right.
it's a whole different ball game. I teach a lot of our Stillwater classes here in the shop, and one of the things I always like to talk about there is, we can kind of, especially as a male, I can kind of channel my male instinct and just be real brutal with everything, right? Like, I
Mm.
don't need a perfect cast. I just, I'm casting a ton of weight or a big rod, or I do a lot of pike fishing, so I'm throwing, 5-inch flies. It's just a little bit more primal, and kind of,
Yeah.
and it's nice to have that break, that break from that technical aspect. Um, Fish in Stillwater, they're not tippet shy. We don't have to go down into those fine points of tippet and small flies to have success there. Um, and when you hook those fish, they don't have walls. Fish in a river, they only have so many places they can go. They know where that log is or that rock. Um,
Right.
Fish in Stillwater, they can go any direction they want, and they do. Um,
Right. Spinning
yeah,
around on the boat.
yeah.
Been there. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
or getting to see your backing, on a trout.
Right.
That's
Right. Right.
that's super fun stuff. So, um, and the technique too. I mean, how you fish Stillwater, it can be intimidating because it's just a big lake. And I know you've talked with other guests in the past about specific ways to find fish and all that, but at the end of the day, it's really pretty simple. You just go. Um, you
Yeah.
just go, and that's the fun part of fly fishing and adventure, even in general. And honestly, to rewind a little bit there, I think that's one of the components of fly fishing that is disappearing, is that whole, like, go check it out. Go see. It may be a bust. It may be a gem. And I certainly have places in my local area that I don't tell a soul about because I did that work.
Right.
And anybody can go do that work. That's the cool thing. But there's something about that sense of adventure. Like, I wonder what this looks like. I wonder
Is
what's
going to hold,
yeah,
right?
and that
Yeah.
promise that
And I'll tell,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt, but you know, you want to talk about secret waters? Chance of finding secret water on moving water is like
zero.
0 to
Yeah,
none. In Stillwater, it's actually still it exists
it does.
because there's been a gap,
Hmm.
right? I think Stillwater was, something people went and did. You fish it with a bobber, the conventional, et cetera,
Yeah.
and then there's a gap, and then there's also in Stillwater what a lot of people I think overlook are like stocking
Hmm.
reports. So a Stillwater that was good 10 years ago, that stocking may have stopped, and those fish may have matured and died off. Whereas you may have one that's now in the mature phase, and that's a new prime water,
Hmm.
etc. So they they change just like rivers in a lot of
Yep.
ways. You have a fire by a river, all of a sudden that river is not as good. Well, 10 years down the line, it might come back, the bug life, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of those different things to take into
Yeah,
consideration.
and when kind of the central point of fly fishing, right, is the bugs, and
Mm-hmm.
understanding the entomology that occurs in the lakes is it's overwhelming. I mean, the amount of food that, especially in our lakes locally here, um, is it's absolutely insane. In fact, Spinney Reservoir
Mm-hmm.
is a gold medal fishery, and the gold medal status isn't has nothing to do with the quality of fish. It has everything to do with the quality of the substrate. So the better the
Mm,
substrate, the more bugs. It's kind of an easy math
right.
problem. The better the fish,
Yeah.
right?
High protein bugs
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Very common.
A lot of aquatic invertebrates. It's just it's nuts how much food is in those lakes. The other thing with Stillwater too is it's really hard to pressure those fish like you can on a river. Um,
Mm,
Stillwater trout are so nomadic. I mean, they're not going to be in the same spot. They'll kind of feed in similar kind of feeding lanes and feeding lines
mm-hmm.
in the lakes, but they're rarely going to be kind of in the same spot all the time. This is
Mm-hmm.
highlighted when anybody that Stillwater fly fishes knows this. You'll hit a pot of fish and it'll be one after another, and then there's a gap where nothing happens,
Right.
and then you'll hit one after another, and then there's a gap, and that kind of goes back to how fish actually feed in Stillwater. Very nomadic, just cruising around
Mm-hmm.
looking for that next meal. After all, trout, are they lazy and opportunistic? So I got to think about that every time I'm trout fishing. They're lazy and opportunistic. We don't really need to go too much deeper than that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and we'll jump back too because you had said I know you've interviewed some people and talked about where to find
Yeah,
fish, and if I boiled that all down, you look for
yeah.
transition. Anything that indicates any kind of a transition from one to another, that's a point to
Well,
target.
it's
So,
just like the rivers, right? We focus on seams and stuff like that, different water speeds, shelves, drop offs,
yep.
extensions, all that kind of thing. It is, you're right. It's the same thing in lakes. And um, for fly fishing, I really look for the substrate, those weed lines. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the more substrate there is, the more bugs there are, and trout are lazy, so they're going to be kind of concentrated in those areas. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Again, transition points are key. It's a pretty easy menu to follow too. When when ice off happens, those fish are going to be bucked up on the shoreline because that's where all the
Mm-hmm.
available food is. As we
Yep.
transition, and now what we're getting into coming into summer, is those fish start to move out a little bit more and seek more food opportunity. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the lakes that we refer to in our area are the South Park reservoirs. There's three of them that we mainly talk about. It's Antero Reservoir, Spinney Reservoir, and 11 Reservoir. Um,
Okay.
and out of those three, Spinney and Antero are pretty similar. They don't get much deeper than 20 feet. even
Okay.
at a full reservoir. So if you think about that, that the sun has a lot of opportunity to penetrate clear to the bottom of the lake, all over the lake,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
substrate is just blowing up everywhere, and the bug life reproduces, and the trout, they reproduce very successfully in those lakes. And
Yeah.
the Colorado Parks and Wildlife biologists have said that those fish in South Park grow 2 to 3 inches a month between May and October. So, yeah, those fish are just kind of rolling around, lifting weights and eating.
That's
It does
right.
not suck. It does not suck at all. Um, that third
I
one,
love it.
11 Mile, is one. Honestly, 11 Mile is turning into my favorite lake out of those three, and a lot of that is because it's getting busier on those other reservoirs. 11 Mile is a lot deeper. There's places that gets to be 100 feet, and obviously those
Huh.
aren't places that we're going to be fly fishing. But what that does is that provides a lot of solitude for those fish. If they do feel pressured or water temperatures are going crazy, they have some solace. Um, Everyone's heard about the Dream Stream. The Dream Stream is named the Dream Stream for some of the migratory fish that can enter that system in the spring for the rainbows and the cut
Mm-hmm.
bows, and then in the fall for the brown trout. So all those fish come from 11 Mile Reservoir. Uh, that you don't really see them outside of those times, especially in the river, but you can access those fish all throughout the season in the lakes. They're still there. They're still
Okay.
eating. Um, and the entire western edge of 11 Mile Reservoir actually looks just like Spinney or Antero. So about a third of the lake is a giant flat that doesn't get deeper than 20 feet, where
Hmm.
that the substrate has the opportunity to grow like that, like it does in those other two lakes. Um,
Okay.
there's really good northern pike population in 11 Mile Reservoir, and there's pike and Spinney. There's also
Okay.
tiger muskie now in Antero, and those tiger muskie are
They're
they're a
aggressive.
very big size now too. They've been in there for about 5 or 6 years, so they're
Oh yeah, they grow
yeah.
quick, man. Those guys like to eat.
And so that's another
What are they
opportunity.
feeding on from a bait perspective?
Um,
Are there panfish
yeah,
and
so
perch and stuff
there's
in there?
yellow perch, and
Okay.
it's funny the evolution of my pike flies, from 10, 15 years ago has changed, where I have a lot more yellow and green type fly patterns for my pike flies.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Right.
the perch are they put the perch in those fisheries just so that those larger pike would stop picking on the trout.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm
What about like smallmouth bass population, things like that? How is that mixed into those
Yeah, and
reservoirs? Because
there's actually some smallmouth still in 11 Mile Reservoir, but the population is very small. Um,
hmm,
and in fact, every once in a while, and I mean like every couple of years, you might catch one. You'll see them pretty
hmm,
frequently in certain parts of the lake, but they're a little harder to target. I don't think the population is that.
is
Yeah,
very high.
yeah.
Yeah, we have a local reservoir here called the Jordanelle,
Oh yeah.
and they put tiger muskie in there actually to help cut back on the smallmouth population
Hmm.
a bit, and which has been great because the stunting was starting to occur
Sure.
on growth because of the food source. But we got beautiful browns in there, and now kokanee
Yeah.
and tiger muskie, and the smallies are plentiful.
Yeah,
So it's
there's also
it's
kokanee salmon in 11 Mile Reservoir, so you get that opportunity on a fly rod when they go into the river in the fall.
mm-hmm,
So it can get pretty dynamic and pretty diverse, but there's a lot of different things that you can do on Stillwater. I mean, you
mm-hmm.
can spend the day trying to fish for trout, or you could go after the toothy guys. And the pike fishing out here, I've never fished for pike in Utah or muskie in Utah, but the pike out here in Colorado, they're a lot harder to target than they are in a place like the Midwest. They're a
Yeah,
lot harder to
yeah.
target. So
Yeah,
sign me up.
but they're rewarding,
Yeah,
man. They're
exactly.
rewarding, and I think like we talked about the migration to Stillwater,
Hmm.
right? Well, there's also at the same time occurring this migration to other
Yep.
species, where it's like, hey, look, trout is great. I mean, it's super fun, and there's plenty of rivers, but there's just a lot of other rivers you can go and target smallies or pike or whatever. Like, go check out some of that stuff. Man,
Yeah,
if you haven't gone smallmouth fishing on something like the Buffalo and the Ozarks, I mean, you want to talk about a good time. You're lighting them up.
absolutely.
They're aggressive. Like every eat is like a charging trout
Yeah,
eat. You don't get a lot of those sips. It just
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
occur. So, I mean, like it's super fun.
Well, and being here in Colorado, there's a common misconception that it's the only trout or the only fish we have are trout, right? And so that's been another tune we've been trying to sing is, there's a lot of other species you can chase here, and
Yeah.
especially here right in the city. I mean, we have some city lakes around here that have some absolutely massive carp, and
Oh yeah. Yep.
it's a hard sell for people because they don't want to go fish a city lake.
They're not the
No,
prettiest donkeys, but they're
exactly, and
donkeys.
they smell and all that stuff. But when you hook one, um,
Oh
yeah,
gosh.
and I have a lot of similar stories to Stillwater. It's a hard sell, but as soon as you get someone hooked on a fish, they don't want to do anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really funny because I think we get into this bifurcation in fly fishing of trout or saltwater,
Yep,
and we're seeing that get filled in with, oh, well, then there's Stillwater, then there's other species,
yep,
then there's just a lot of more opportunities. So I just think it's awesome. The sport's growing, and
yeah,
more and more anglers are getting more proficient in different areas, and you're starting to see I think a lot of really competent anglers out there
absolutely.
because of that.
Yeah, and they're
So,
they're pushing the industry too. It's for the fly fishing
mm-hmm.
industry. They should be celebrating that. I mean, any chance a rod manufacturer has a chance to make a rod for a wiper or
The specificity,
exactly,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, specificity,
We
yeah,
all know that fly
yeah.
fishing is littered with yeah, oh my
Gearheads.
gosh, yeah. There's something for everything, and then there's a modification of that. So,
Right, right.
it's really cool. And I've grown up with anglers that don't even fish for trout anymore. They're they're
Yeah,
fishing in downtown Denver for carp every day. Um,
yeah.
so that's
Well, you go into a fly shop, and now there's a row of bins for carp
yep,
flies. There's a row of bins for bass flies. It wasn't like that.
absolutely,
It
yeah,
used to be here's all the flies, and then someone would come and be like, "Hey, do you have like any panfish flies or bass flies?" And the guy would reach under and he'd pull out the little tray and he'd go, "I got like 6 or 7
exactly,
here."
yeah. Yeah, we have a very large fly selection in the shop, and our Stillwater section is massive. Our streamer section is massive.
Yeah,
Bass section is pretty big, pretty impressive, and it's you're getting to that stage where in fly fishing where I think someone goes to a crowded river enough times and they start to get bummed out, where it's becoming a lot more interesting to them to maybe think outside the box and tell me
right.
about this Stillwater thing, or tell me about carp or whatever species. It could be anything there. I'm not really a super big carp guy. I'll definitely go fish for them. I'll fish for anything that swims. I don't care. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
it's cool to see this just wide variance in what people are actually fishing for, and it's pushing
Yeah,
technologies, it's pushing fly patterns. It's really cool to see, um, and I think it's making that innovation in and of itself is making it more inviting for people to come do this. Um,
yeah, yeah,
it doesn't matter if you live in Colorado or Utah or wherever you live. I mean, there's opportunity to fish for fish on the fly wherever you are. Um,
yeah.
and
Yep.
that's the cool thing that should be celebrated.
Yeah, yeah. And don't get me wrong. Hold on to the Western dry
Oh
fly
yeah,
trout
yeah,
fishing because it is
that's
amazing.
my heart.
It's
Absolutely.
absolutely incredible. I'm not going to overrate that, but just don't. We're going to talk about that. The confinement side of things. So what I do want to do is get on this subject of the midge stripping technique. So let's talk about this midge stripping technique that you like to use.
I'm sorry. I think you froze up there. So
We froze
yeah,
up there. That's okay. We'll get that cleaned up. John, I do want to talk about the mid stripping
yeah,
technique that you had talked about. So let's get into some detail on that.
yeah. So this is a technique that, I mean, I didn't invent it or anything. I'm not saying that, but this is the technique that I've kind of messed around with and modified as a stillwater technique. Um, you can do it from the shore, but it's definitely more ideal to be on some sort of watercraft. This is a technique that I like to teach a lot of people, and I probably fish this technique about 85% of the time I'm fishing for trout on Stillwater. Um, and it's real simple. I like an intermediate sink line, maybe a type 1 or a type 2, depending on the depth that I'm fishing or the lakes that I'm fishing. Um, as I noted earlier, the lakes here are pretty shallow, so intermediate sink 1 or 2 is perfect. A hover line, a line that'll just go maybe a couple of feet below the surface and kind of hang there. And then I like to I'll use a butt section. I like amnesia because it has some rebound in there. It's not going to be so crisp if I have a heavier hook set or I have a really violent head shaking fish. It's going to eat up some of that energy. And then
Okay.
I like to, I'll actually put on about a 20-foot leader or so, just straight fluorocarbon. I like to use about 12 to 15 pound fluorocarbon in that still water, which would equate, to the 0x category. Um, and then on the end of that, I like to put a micro swivel. And this
Mm,
is where I'll start building kind of my tippet system. I like that micro swivel for a lot of reasons, but it keeps the flies true, whether I'm trying to mend or fold some line. It's not going to translate clear down into the flies and move those flies in an unnatural manner. So I'll use a piece of maybe 10-pound fluorocarbon from that point in pieces. So I'll do it in about 24 to 36-inch piece, and then
okay.
I'll just do a simple triple surgeon's knot and leave a big tag, and then at the end of that, I usually fish 2 flies on this. You can fish 3, but 2 seems to be a little bit more ideal. You're not going to get as many tangles. So
Right.
moving up that system at my tippet and at my tippet intersection with that big tag end, I can tie on a motion fly. And if you think about Stillwater, almost everything in Stillwater swims. Our midges, they when they pupate, they go in more of a vertical motion. Exactly. Um,
Yeah, the inchworms.
yeah, scuds, damselflies, calabatus, leeches, everything that we're really going to see in our still waters does move. So I'll tie one of those maybe emerging stages type flies on that first one, and then that bottom fly I can use something weighted. Fish a lot of leeches back there. Um, Something that's going to keep more of that 45 kind of degree angle
Hmm.
when I'm actually stripping. Now I don't want this to go straight down. I want it to be almost parallel out for me, just sinking. Um,
Okay.
and that hover line will keep it in the water column. The longer my leader is, will enable me to fish different parts of that water column. Um, so when we have calabatus hatches, which we're like right on the doorstep of, June is insane out here for that Lake Mayfly. I'll tie
Okay.
2 calabatus on that rig, and it's absolutely bananas. If you can get if you can get in the middle of one of those hatches, it literally will be every cast. Now the key here to this whole technique is it's not stripping like you would a streamer. It's
Hmm.
incredibly slow. So you can either use the crawling motion with your hand and your
Yep.
fingers and
Like rolling
yeah, and
and
slowly crawling it, or you can. I like to just strip it if I'm holding my rod right in front of me, and I hold the line. I'm gonna maybe count to 5 and pull that line to my hip, and I'm gonna stop.
mm, a
Slow.
slow, like 6 inch pull.
It's a real. It's a crawl, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
do those crawls in fairly big motions. I want to strip in, a foot and a half to maybe even two and a half
Mm,
feet of line when I do those. Um, Now the trick was going to be in determining the correct pauses, all that kind of stuff. But for me, the real key in this is not to move those flies too fast. I want to let them drop and sit. I want to put a good break in between those strips or crawls.
Mm-hmm.
And almost 100% of the time, you're going to get hit as soon as you start to pull that line again. You've gotten that trout's attention on that first strip, and he's watching those flies kind of fall, and then they move again. And that's
right. And then you're imitating that rise to the surface,
exactly,
right? The
yeah.
natural progression of the entomology
Exactly,
or
yeah.
the aquatic worm or whatever
Yeah,
it
and
is.
it can be,
Okay.
and my only other piece of advice is hold on. I mean, hold on, because the takes are very violent. You almost don't even need to set the hook.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be fun. And periodically we'll get, especially if we're fishing during a really good calibatus hatch or there's a lot of damsels in the water.
Mm.
You'll get two fish at the same time, and that's
Yeah.
rarely ends up well.
It's
Yeah.
bananas. Oh man, when
Mm-hmm.
they're crossing the wrong directions and
Yeah,
everything else.
you're
Yeah,
convinced
it's
you just caught the state record. But yeah, it's a cool technique. It takes some work to do, but I always encourage people to try it. And again, it's one of those things that's completely different. You can certainly set up an indicator rig and go out there and just watch a bobber all day.
watch it.
We
Yeah.
call it hanging pain. Um, you could do that, and it's super effective. Absolutely, there's no arguing that. But this really kind of breaks it up. And in my book, it's a lot more effective in Stillwater. Anytime I
Yeah.
can get those flies moving, I'm going to get the attention of those fish. You can do any
Yeah.
combo too. You can do any combo of bugs that you're going to find in your local Stillwater. I've used this technique on warm water species with two
Mm-hmm.
smaller streamers, and it works. It works beautifully. So it's
Yeah.
it's kind of funky for sure. And if I didn't do a good job explaining I do apologize. We do have a
No.
pretty cool video on YouTube that really breaks it down on
Okay.
our shop's YouTube. So
What's the shop's YouTube
it's just
channel?
Anglers Covey. Yep.
Okay.
If
All
you
right.
get it,
Good. And what would the name of the video be? Would
it's
it
called midge
be
stripping.
midge
Yep.
stripping? Okay. All right.
Yep.
Cool. So midge stripping on Angler Covey. That'll get you some more details there. But I like how you talked about like finding out where the fish
Yep.
are in the water column. And I always like to think of Stillwater as like layered
That's
cake,
exactly how you
right?
should. Yep.
Like you think of it as layered cake, and I think one of the key components is really just coming up with your own formula to understand how am I systematically approaching each
Yep.
layer to understand where the fish are. And then once I find them, now I know how that is. And a lot of guys use a countdown technique.
Yep.
That's what I do. But it's where do you start? And for me, I start with I'm going to do a 3-second
Yep.
countdown.
Exactly.
And then I'm going to do a 6-second countdown. And then I'm going to do, I'm just going to keep bumping down until I hit them or feel like I'm in the zone. And that's going to be different for each line type too
Yep.
now, right?
Exactly.
So like you said, if I'm running an intermediate, I might count a little longer. If I'm running a type 4, I might count a little shorter. But the idea is to really understand, okay, how far is a fish going to move to eat, right? And I always say it's about 12 inches is the max. So if I know I'm fishing every 12 inches, I'm really fishing every 6 inches of water because it's half of that.
Exactly. Yep.
So if you start to kind of understand that from a Stillwater perspective, you can really understand the depth and like you said, where they are in the water column. And then once you discover that, okay, now you know you're in the zone, but that's going to change over the day too. So
Yep.
if you're like, hey, I'm hitting it and I'm being really successful and we're really close to the surface, well, that might be morning time or a late morning. But then midday, the sun comes out and the bugs start to go and
Yep.
the water warms up. They're going to go a little deeper. So now okay, I'm going to go a couple more seconds, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So some tips for you guys out there that haven't experienced Stillwater. There's a couple little things that you could do to help yourself be really successful
And
right out
I
of the
mean, you
gate.
nailed it. And the technical term for what you're talking about is you're trying to find the thermocline, right? You're trying to find
Yep.
the heaviest. you're exactly right. It's like layered cake. There's a point where there's a layer almost acts as a diaphragm, and then all the water below that is there's less oxygen. It's less ideal for bug life for trout to just hang. Certainly they can
Mm-hmm.
be there, but right above that, that's the golden zone, and that's what we're trying to determine. And I love how you highlighted that because that's one of the biggest things. It's going to change even all over the lake. In
Mm-hmm.
the spot I'm in, I may be having success with a certain countdown or a certain technique. When I move, I'm going to have to start all over. And the other piece of advice, and this is something that I really hammer home, is don't just randomly fish. Be really technical in that aspect about it. Like do your 5 second countdown, your 10, whatever increment you want to do there, and remember that. Say it to yourself as you're doing it. So if you find success in
Mm-hmm.
that zone, you can replicate it. Um, you won't
Right.
spend, the next 15 casts trying to find that exact same spot. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. I love it.
And you hit it too with how it's different in different areas of lake. And I'm going to go back to your example. I think it was uh Dieter Reservoir that you mentioned that had maybe I can't, it was one of your local reservoirs. You said it's really deep in
Oh,
one
11
section,
mile,
but the east side,
11 mile,
11 mile, but the one side is 20
the
feet
west end.
for a
Yeah.
huge swath, right? So that shallow swath, the temperature and the
Hmm.
thermocline of the water is going to alter throughout the day differently than the deeper water.
Absolutely.
So it's just like a river. I'm going to break down a hole differently than I'm going to break down a bunch of seams or a shallow section or a long flat run. So, all the techniques that you apply on the river can be a lot of times translated to the still water.
Absolutely.
It's just understanding your environment. So
Yeah.
hopefully you listen to some of the still water shows and you guys get out there and take advantage of that. But in the meantime, we're going to jump into our last
Yeah.
section. And our last section is breaking down that box of doing the same thing. I know you hear from a lot of customers that come in and you see it all the time. They do the same thing. They're looking for something else. So maybe give us some tips on that we could take away with today.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I would just say, no matter how long you've been fly fishing, whether it's, decades or this is day one, stay open minded. Being closed minded is going to be your your biggest downfall. Um, we all have those super favorite spots that we can go fish, and we know we're going to catch fish there. And we see it here where every time you're there, the same person's there. You're kind of selling yourself short. You're selling yourself short in
Mm-hmm.
the experience as an angler. You're just selling yourself short. That's the best way I could put it. There's so much opportunity out there, and I think really embrace that whole sense of adventure. That's why most of us have gotten into fly fishing because it was this new shiny thing and it was mysterious and there was so much to learn, right? And I think when you
Mm-hmm.
master something, for me, the natural progression is to try to move to the next thing and start all over, That's the fun part. There's no such thing as knowing too much in fly fishing. And, as an angler and especially as a guide, even more so as a guide, I want to be well versed. I want to be able to adapt to any single condition that I'm going to see on the water, to pull that audible to Stillwater, to go carp fishing in town, to let's Euro nymph, to let's go over here and throw streamers, to, let's go over here and throw dry flies. So
Right. Right.
I think really, really being open minded is the biggest tool there. It's a harder conversation to have because we've heard the term, like the dry fly purists. They only fish when there's dry flies and or when there's dry fly opportunity. Um, that like makes me cringe because I want to fish all the time. I don't want to fish just
Right. Yeah.
20% of the year. Um,
Right.
and don't get me wrong, there's nothing better than throwing dry flies at rising trout. But
Yeah.
seek those. Every experience is different, and you have to when you go into that with an open mind. It's going to hook you. It's definitely going to hook you. Um, I have a really good client that I've been fishing with for over a decade. Um, Comes and fishes with me several times a year, and for a lot of years, I was telling him, let's go fish some Stillwater. You fished all these rivers. He's a good stick, and let's do something different. And it took literally years to convince him to try this, to
Try it,
actually.
right?
He trusted me though, right? And
Yeah.
he has limited time here, and he wants to maximize that, and he knows the experience he's going to get if he goes to, this river, and we do this, and
Mm-hmm.
I took him out on my
He's a creature of comfort.
creature of
We
comfort,
all
yeah.
are, right?
And
It,
the touchstone of growth is pain, or it's not, all
right.
that stuff.
That's
It's
right.
not supposed to be comfortable. So in fly fishing, it's not. It makes you feel like you don't know anything, and I would urge people to embrace that. But he came out on my boat with me, and it didn't take long. It took, we got to our spot and started. I got him all keyed in with actually the midge stripping technique, and it was about 10 minutes in, and he hooked probably a 27-inch, 28-inch rainbow trout. It's spinny, and it took him into his backing 3 times. And I have pictures of him. I was taking pictures of his face. It was classic. It was,
The
yeah.
Joker.
I mean, he couldn't believe it. He could not believe what had just happened. And now, this was, I think, about 3 years ago. Now, all 3 times he comes out to see me, he only wants to fish Stillwater. So it's one of
Yeah,
those
yeah,
things, we have that saying, the tug is the drug. And once you experience that, those different, those different things in fly fishing, it's all new, it's all fresh, and it's really an exciting time to be an angler, right? Now
yeah,
you've just added another experience to your whole repertoire there.
yeah.
That if the
Yep.
river's busy, now you have another option. Or um, instead of yelling at everybody that'll listen that the river's too busy, you can just go make your own solitude and find a different experience.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's our tag here on the Fly Fishing Insider
Nice.
podcast. Any species, any
Yeah.
time, any water.
Love it.
That's what we want you to be prepared for. And it opens up our opportunity, I think. And, we talked about, as humans, we're creatures of
Yes.
comfort, right? And what I will say is if you experiment in other areas, you're going to feel
Hmm.
vulnerable, but you're going to learn. And let me tell you, you're going to go back to that same creature comfort scenario. You're going to be even more comfortable. You're going to go from
Yep.
the lazy boy to the king lazy boy with the cinema theater and the cup
Yep.
holders. So, yeah, enjoy it, man.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, John, it was great having you on the show and connecting on all these items. This was a really neat and different approach to Stillwater that we've had on in the
Awesome.
past. And talking about it. So, Anglers Covey, what's the phone number at Anglers Covey if somebody wants to
Yeah,
reach
it's
out?
719-471-2984. Um, yeah, the fly
Give that one more time so people can write
is
it down.
719-471-2984. And if
Okay.
you're in the area, you definitely have to come to the shop. I mean, I think we're
Yeah.
one of the largest independent fly shops in the country. We have about an 8,000 square foot shop. You could cast fly rods in the shop if you wanted. We have casting ponds out back. Just a huge, cool footprint of a fly shop. And, anybody here, everyone's on the same page. No matter what question you have, everyone here is happy to answer that and help you,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know you and a lot of the guys in the shop fish all over the country, if not all over the world. So if anybody has questions about areas in and around, don't hesitate to call out. These guys are always willing to help or put you on a body that's going to know. So John,
100%,
once
yeah.
again, great to have you guys on the show. I appreciate it. And that's it for us this week, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Christian.
Thanks.
I really appreciate it.
You got it, bud. Okay, you're set, buddy.
Okay.